Hey, what is up everybody? Blades for here and today for you guys another video of Persona 5X. Inside today's video, guys, we're going to be talking about the future DPS units that you could very well invest into here. And I'll try to break this down into each element as well as their DPS factors, what they do, and obviously how they play. You guys are going to see the actual gameplay of the characters, and I'll try to also explain their skills and passives while I'm at it. So if you guys are interested in this, be sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. And as always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really does help me out quite a lot. We're still trucking to 16K, and I would try to like to hit about 20K at the end of the freaking year. So we're going to be trying to push as much as possible. You're going to see a lot of content coming from me, so any help is amazing help. But let's get straight into it. Now, I've gotten this question on what type of units you should really invest in, especially when it comes down to like the mono elements. A lot of you guys are trying to really pre-plan for that, so I think this is going to be the best video for you guys. So we're going to start going from version updates upwards, so the ones that's next to come, and then after that we're also going to categorize them by their elements too. So trying to do a little bit of both, but let's just get straight into it and see how it works. So for the first thing that we're going to go over is the blessed side, and the reason that we're going over the blessed units first is because these guys are coming up next, or at least one of them is coming up very soon. The first character being in 2.1.1, where we got this in TW and KR, being Summer Motoha. Now, Summer Motoha is an amazing unit. She's absolutely nice to go ahead and use as a AoE DPS. She definitely brings a lot to the table. She's one of the few units that will be using a ton of HP in order to really get that damage, and that's really how all of her skills do react. Every skill that she does use consumes a little bit of her HP, and then if she does have overheal, her core skill being the skill 3 is pretty much getting cooldown reduced as long as we're getting a ton of HP. So there's going to be characters you want to put her aside, such as like the newest, or at least the more standard character being Minami that we have inside of Global right now, or the newer character being Summer Tomoko, who also will be able to help her heal. The more HP she has, the more damage bonus and attack she's really going to get off of this, and it really makes it so a ton of her passives are going to work even better. All of this is going to be HP oriented, so as long as you have this, you're going to have a easy time playing her. What I would say, if you wanted to really build her, and which we'll get more into this when her character comes out and I release a build guide, have a ton of crit damage on her, have a ton of attack on her, and you'll be in the right direction. But no matter what, you need at least a good amount of HP. I want to say the max that you really do need is like maybe 1500. I currently have 13K, and she does more than enough, but that's also because I have her maxed out, so I technically should probably have a little bit more, if I'm being honest. I think I'm slacking a little bit on her HP, but let's go ahead and show off her skills in battle and show you guys how she really works. Inside of battle, you can pretty much auto a lot of things fairly easy with her, and it's not even a joke with that. If you want to put your game on auto, it's pretty easy to go ahead and do so. Our highlight looks something like this, where we go ahead and use it with Ford, and she's going to use this. Pretty much smack a beach ball, smack it on down, and it does a huge AoE splat. This AoE splat is going to be mainly part of her whole kit, and it's just going to be interesting that she's going to use all the time. Her main skill being the skill 3, which you guys are going to immediately see right here, is pretty darn good as well. Whoops, I accidentally took out the 10th. But main skill is pretty darn good here. It's going to be the one thing that she kind of revolves around, and it's because of how much damage it really can do. That's called Wave Chaser, in which, based on her midsummer state, she'll be able to, of course, deal even more damage from it. Now we're going to go ahead and restart this as well, so you guys can see the other two skills. Now her other two skills you're also going to use quite often, which is going to be the second one. The second skill is called Leisurely Vacation. It's pretty much a single target attack that does a little bit of a splash damage, restores 20% of her max HP, which makes it somewhat decent, but you're not really going to actually use this too much. It also does an additional amount of less damage to that same target, so you are getting a little bit more out of it if you are already in her midsummer form here. But we're going to go ahead and show off the last skill, which is the skill 1, and that's called Summer Magic. Summer Magic, as well as one of the few characters, or one of the few skills that she does use besides her skill 3. Summer Magic does at least around like 87.8% of damage here, and it does consume a little bit of our HP. So you do want to make sure there's a way to heal that HP, get that overheal, so you can really spam the what's called the skill 3 as well. But that is how core, or at least closer does look. Let's move on to the next blessed unit. Going over our next future blessed DPS, we have Kasumi here, who came out in the like 3.1 area for the version updates. Now this character is a while from now on the global end, but she still is to be talked about. As a single target blessed character, she actually works very well without her 5-star weapon and works very well with the 5-star weapon, both being able to hit around the 1 million plus damage area, which is a huge number that really is easy for her to do. She can hit easily more than that, but 1 mil is that mainly benchmark damage marker. This character works a little bit different because she does need these things called posture stacks, and by using certain moves she can get these said posture stacks to trigger a different mode called masquerade mode that allows her to deal some crazy colossal damage with her highlight. So let's go ahead and show off her skills and talk about her a little bit more. So with Kasumi, things work a little bit differently. In her skill, a little repertoire that she ends up having, she has 2 different single target skills and a single target buff. The single target buff is where the magic is really going to happen. It's called dancing together. Well, she ends up selecting a dance partner, and by using them, you're increasing not only the dance partner's attack, but you're also increasing her attack by a good amount of 32.4%. This is going to last for 3 whole turns, and by doing this, you're able to then get something called a posture stack. If you look down below her face, she has these little 4 stacks down there. You want to have at least 2 of those in order to perform what you need to perform, which is going to be the masquerade mode. So let's just go ahead and show off the skill 2, where she's going to enhance a different person's attack here. I'm just going to put it on Wonder, and as you can see, she puts this little spotlight on them, and it now gives them both a actual DPS looking attack here. Now the next attack that we're going to immediately go ahead and show off is going to be the skill 1 called Light and Darkness. This skill, she'll end up gaining a posture stack, which is going to be Brave Step, and this does a decent bit of damage to the enemy. So if we go ahead and check now, we have 1 stack down there. We use our skill 1, which is something like this here. He ends up doing this little hit, which is pretty darn nice to do, and it gets a stack off. Now if you're actually doing the rotation correctly, she also does a follow-up hit with the dance together partner, but just since we didn't do an attack, of course we were not able to do this. Now that we have these stacks that we need to do, her highlight is a little bit different. It's not really a highlight gauge, it's something called masquerade mode. Whenever she has this flare, you go ahead and click this. It puts her in a mode where now in this form, she clicks it again, she will end up doing her highlight, but this highlight can crit unlike most other highlights. So it does something like this, where she goes ahead and does a little bit of a dance, and she tosses the sword at the enemy, dealing some decent bit of damage. Now that was without setup. It does not take up, of course, her whole turn or anything like that. It mainly did just, of course, throw out the sword, and then that was the big boy damage. Now the next thing is the skill 3, which is more of your colossal damage move called Blooming Heart, where it does this little effect and does a ton of damage, as you guys can see on the screen. And this skill increases the damage by 30% if you are in the masquerade state. So you usually want to make sure you're able to, of course, do this immediately to get this 30% off and give her an extra 32, or I think it's like 29% of crit damage. But now we went over her, let's talk about the next category. The next DPS we're going to go over is in the physical category, being the man Messa. Now Messa himself is the only other physical damager besides Ryuji. He ended up, well, he's coming out a little bit sooner as well, which is going to be 2.2 for TW and KR. I think it should be like 2.1 or 2.2 for what's it called, global as well. So you're going to look out for this character very quickly, because he's going to come out very, very soon. Now this unit is a pretty interesting one. He can be played both as a DOT unit as well as a physical DPS. Just the physical DPS side is kind of locked behind his A2, seeing he does more of his laceration techniques way more if he actually has that higher A2 mount. Now this character works very well with his 5-star weapon, but of course if you have the 4-star weapon, it works just as good. But we're gonna go ahead and show off some of his techniques, because he has a different thing that was not really incorporated in the game at the time. So let's talk about it. The Messa, as I did say, plays a little bit weirdly, and if all his skills are something like this, where they're a little bit of more of a single target type of skill. Each one of these skills can very well provide a bleed on them, and with the first skill looking something like this, he actually does a little bit interesting things. Where it's a couple slashes and they could put on some bleeds, being now that I have my character up around 7 bleeds. If it's a normal type character and don't have, like, of course, any awareness on them, he's only going to put a little bit less than this. It should be like 3 or 4 bleeds, and they will go to that said character. Once an enemy does die, it can very well transfer to the other enemies, so it's not always gone. But once you, of course, you do that, that's just the skill 1. You didn't have the skill 2 looking something like this, and this is all in the hunter mode. This is not the executioner mode here, so everything looks a little bit like this in dull. Well, let's say you have the bleeds already and you have now your executioner mode, which is going to be this mask. When of course having this mask, his skills are going to change and he goes through an animation like this. The first skill is going to look a lot different, where instead of it being those couple slashes, it now takes a little bit of his HP here, and the first skill does a long slash downwards, dealing some nice old damage that does deal some DLT damage as well. As for the second skill in executioner mode, things are a little bit different. Instead of him placing bleeds on you, he actually is able to rip these bleeds on off by using the skill 2, which does an upward hit, and it does multiple stacks of damage on the down hit as well. But seeing we've already removed the bleeds and have killed the enemy, you won't really get to see the down hit damage as well. But let's go ahead and check out the highlight, which is something like this, where he combines his combination attack with his persona and does a final slash, which is pretty darn cool. But now we went over the physical damage side of things. Let's go ahead and check out the next category. Going to the side category, still to this day, Haru is our only DPS for the side of things here, which isn't really a bad thing, but also isn't a good thing as well. His character is an AoE DPS that brings a lot to the table. She also uses her gun skill quite a lot, which is going to be a part of her main mechanic. And with all of the things inside of this character's hits, it's hard to kind of explain what she does. To put it simple, she's able to put crosshairs on an enemy here, and this will allow her to get certain energy moderations or mods in general that will allow her to deal even more damage. Each mod will deal different either damage markers or give you different skill effects. So all you got to know, she does those type of things, and it all is scaled off of her EHR stats. Whether you need this character's weapon or not, you definitely would want to get the weapon because it is highly involved in her entire kit. But now we've explained over this type of thing, let's go ahead and check out her skills. All right, so when it comes to Haru, the way she plays, it's going to be fairly interesting. I'm actually going to go ahead and show you guys the first skill immediately, because with the skill 1 or the A1, she preemptively uses the skill 1, which is something like this, where it does these little swirls and it does a ton of damage off bat. That's called focused aim, and although it does that side damage, it also has a chance to apply a crosshair or something called sight on the enemy, in which increases our damage later on depending on the mods that we do have. Pretty darn interesting to see. It's going to be one of the first skills that you use quite often, and maybe like the only skill besides of course your skill 3 and your gun. The second skill looks something like this, called suppress fire, where she has all these little aim targets and you press that little skill and they sink in on that one person, dealing some crazy damage. Since we have the A1, of course, she consistently uses that first skill off preemptively, so just get used to seeing that, especially if you're investing into the A1. As for the A3, or sorry, the skill 3 called Iron Burst, she takes a skill that does an AoE damage, and it does a lump sum of damage at that, being at 129%, and she can increase her critical rate if there is a crosshair on the enemy. With this all in mind, it does help her deal a ton of damage, which looks something like this. This pops up with this little eye here and does a huge amount of damage when there's a ton more people in which you set up. Let's check out the highlight. Almost forgot to show one of Haru's main deals, which is going to be the gun. If you guys didn't notice, at the bottom of her face she has these 2 shotgun shells, in which as long as she has 2 of these guys, she's able to do this animation right here. Shoots out a bullet that does some very nice damage to the enemy and can deal even more damage depending on how you have her buffed. Now of course we'll be able to show off her highlight as well, but give me a second because we got to burn some of these, and we did use our highlight a little bit early. So let's go ahead and show this off using cord immediately, where she does shoot a couple bullets at the enemy and ends it with a very amazing explosion, dealing some crazy damage as well. So gotta love it, pretty darn cool. And let's go ahead and go to the next character. The next elemental group we're going to talk about today is Mont Figure Skater under the Wind category. Now she is a dual typing, which is a Wind and Ice character, the only one that really belongs in this game right now, but we primarily use her as a Wind DPS, seeing the other side is more of a sustainability type comp. This character is the only 5-star DPS Wind character here yet, so we do have to kind of deal with what we got. But she's still a cool character. She does follow up damage, she can form change, she can freeze people, she can even provide windswept type abilities, and everything is really darn nice. So for this character, I do highly recommend their 5-star weapon because it does help them out in the crit damage category, which is very needed for this character, as well as the crit rate category as well. So you want to have as much crit rate as possible, and this weapon does make it possible. So without further ado, let's go ahead and showcase what she can do. So taking a look at Mont Figure Skater here, she can swap freely on her element. Of course, you have the wind side and then the ice side, but depending on how many of that element you have in your party, she will start off in that form. Then we're talking about the wind side of her. She does have these said moves with 2 single target moves and a AoE move. The main single target that you're going to be using is the skill 3, but the skill 1 looks something like this, where she drops down a little bit of a force of wind. It does a multi-hit and can often deal some decent damage. The way how you really want to set things up though is going to be off the skill 3, which does a domain, and this allows her to do her follow-up skill. So we're going to go ahead and use the skill 3. This sets up a little bit of a domain like this, dealing multi-hits, but if of course you go again, you will end up being able to do a follow-up attack, which is going to be based on the skill 1. This follow-up attack is going to have its own animation, and it's going to deal a ton of damage with the skill 1 itself, where then she will follow up with an extra hit, which is going to be pretty darn nice when it comes down to actually dealing some extra damage. But the skill 2 looks something like this, where she swirls different tornadoes around and it does a multi-hit. So let's say we set up with the skill 3, which I'm going to go ahead and do this now so you guys can kind of get a little bit of a gist of how this does work. Hopefully we're able to do this live, because I do want to show you guys the follow-up attack. If we can't, well, just know that she does have this said follow-up attack here. We end up using this here, where she puts up the actual field, and the next time she attacks, which will happen this time, next time we get her into this said form, she's going to toss down a wind bird and deal some nice damage. We'll have to show off the highlight after this, so just be patient with me. But using the skill 1, or at least not using anything here, her thing starts moving down at the bottom, and as you see, she does a follow-up attack, which does this move right there. It doesn't deal a multi-hit, but it does deal a decent bit of damage, and we're going to get back into this so you guys can actually just immediately see the highlight, because I don't really want to waste too much time on trying to keep cutting and clipping on certain things here. So go ahead and get back in this so you guys can actually see this offering. And I think our best way to try and get this up immediately is just skip around so we can get up the highlight bar immediately the next round. But once we do have this highlight bar, she does a little bit of a spin in a circle, and this ends up leading to a devastating damage marker, which can be pretty darn cool. Now her ice form I might as well talk about as well, because she is a ice character, or either, you know what, we'll just put it in the ice section. But using the skill, or at least the highlight here, she swirls around in the vortex, does a multi-hit of a tornado, and does some decent damage out to boot. But now we talk about the wins, let's go ahead and go to the next section, which is going to be the ice section. Now going with our ice characters, we are once again talking about Mont here, because she is one of the ice DPSs, although she uses herself more as a sustainability as a ice character. But I'm not going to really explain how her moves really work too often. You guys are going to see the animations. I'll give a brief description, and then we'll talk about the next DPS, who is one of the newer characters. Right inside the ice form, her animations are somewhat changed a little bit, but we have the, actually let me go ahead and use this so I can show all 3 immediately here. Where we'll end up having the same type deal. She's going to still have the domain, where it's all going to be ice this time. She's going to still have the single target hit, and she's going to have another hit, which is the AoE hit as well, but they don't do multi damage. Instead of this, she actually is going to be applying different debuffs on the enemy, which is quite different. So for the skill 1, it does something like this. Instead of a multi hit, it does a singular hit, which is quite normal. And then for the skill 2, she has these tornadoes that do cycle around, but they only hit once instead of multiple times. And then with the last one being the skill 1, she of course drops a little bit of an ice drop on them, and that does some decent damage as well, all having a different effect than normal. So surely do keep that in mind. The ult looks different as well. Instead of it being wind related, it is now ice related, which does a single attack instead of a multi hit like the wind one does. But now we talked about this, let's go ahead and go to the next ice character. Now our next ice DPS is one of the ones that recently just came out, literally this update here, and which is Summer Puppet. Now Summer Puppet is a very good ice DPS that also has some follow-ups that's a little bit weird to use. She has a little bit of a form switch as well with the skill 3, where now she will start riding on the surfboard and deal some follow-up damage. That's really good to see. Now this character you're not going to see for a long time. I do say you want her 5-star weapon. I'm unsure how her 4-star weapon really does work on her. I never ended up doing a review over it, but it's still very stylish to see. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and show off her kits as well. All right, so going ahead and taking a look at Miyu, she has 2 AoE moves as well as her form switch. You're always going to want to start with the form first no matter what, which once you go ahead and pop this off as a skill 3, she's able to ride on this surfboard. Doing so will then allow her to start proccing off her follow-up attacks, which looks something like that. That follow-up attack is going to happen quite often depending on at least what you're able to run here. Seeing I ended up popping a thing that allows us to go again, we are off our board, but she will consistently ride this board until she really can't do anything else. As for her first skill, it does a decent bit of ice damage to the enemy, allowing you to have a 100% chance to freeze both of them for 2 whole turns, and it gives her SP back. Now for the second skill, which is called the Blue Concerto, this one itself does an ice damage to everyone, and if you're in the C domain, aka her skill 3, she very well can deal some extra damage and reset the cooldown as well. So it would look something like this, where she swirls all these type C animals and it does some decent damage. I'm gonna show off your highlight as well, and the highlight's pretty darn cool, seeing that it does AoE ice damage to everyone, and if the C domain is up, it does additional damage. But as you saw, she tosses those water sea animals at people and it does a ton of damage. Now we talked about her, let's go ahead and go to the next category. Looking at the next category, which is fire, we have to look at RLD first, or Rin Lion Dance, which came out in 3.3. 3.3 was a huge Chinese New Year update, so we had this character being Chinese New Year Rin, who does a crazy amount of damage. She was a huge jump on AoE DPSs that we were not expecting to see so often, and she's pretty darn good. Now this character can work with her 4-star weapon very well. I know I did a whole review about the 4-star weapon, which she does still deal some crazy high damage. 5-star weapon is also incredibly good, so if you guys want to invest into it, you very well can. But we're going to show off this character's type skills as well, because this character is not only stunning but does some amazing type damage. Now Rin Lion Dance was quite different from other characters. In fact, she brought the whole use of technicals a lot different than what we most see. On global, we see technicals more as the extra hits with Makoto, but technicals are fully different for this character. If you have wind on people, you may very well cause like backdraft on an opponent. If you have ice, she's able to do different what's called status effects that really most characters don't have. So this was a huge new thing for everyone here. But we have a few things that we got to go over. The skill 1, which looks something like this, is an AoE type skill where she drops this huge flaming ball on your head and does a ton of damage. Based on the amount of people are there, of course, the more damage you're gonna get out of it, and it's gonna look even more so crazy as we go through the AoE side of things. Then of course we have the skill 2. The skill 2 is gonna look something like this, where you're not really gonna use it too often because it applies a DOT on the enemy, which it drops that huge firecracker down, dealing some decent damage. As for the skill 3, it is her form change, which is this little mask right here, where she ends up lighting her what's called her sword ablaze, and then she has a whole different mechanic. As you see on this side of the screen, the sword is now flaming here. What ends up happening is she takes this and she changes the sword into an actual skill attack, which does this little launch attack here, dealing some crazy technical damage. Now I do actually need to get these cards, so I'm gonna go ahead and use my stamina for this, and then we're immediately going to show off her highlight as well, so you guys can really get a good look at it. She's a really good character and still is viable today, but of course there are tons of fire DPS out there. So if we go ahead and use her highlight, she does something like this, where she picks up a firecracker and shoots it out of the little lion on her head that she carries, which does amplify the amount of fire damage that she can deal, which is pretty darn cool. But now we talked about her, let's get to the man of the hour for the fire side. All right, so talking about the man of the hour, which is Makoto Yuki. This character came out, of course, with the P3 collab, and this really started in like version 4.1.1, which is a hot minute from now. This was like a version right after the anniversary, so this character is still a new character. All of his skills are single targets, except for, of course, the skill 2, which is a AoE buff. You're not really going to use it too often, but everything does contribute to one of his main gimmicks being the special moon phase. Once you have enough moon phases in general, he will then consume them all to do a special moon phase, which does an enhanced attack, which you guys will see later on. But this character does have something a little different. Instead of them being highlights, he works off of thirties, so he's not really going to be used with Cord all too often at all, but with the other character being Yukari. This is going to have a third G for himself being just the damage third G, and then the other one being Cadenza being the buff third G. So we're going to show them both off. And he also has a support skill, which is very different compared to the other characters. Let's go ahead and check that out. So as I did say before, unlike of course the other characters where they work off highlight, Makoto Yuki works off of something totally different, which is third G. Third G is a whole different bar that he builds at the bottom, as you see here, and whenever you play a P3 character, the screen will change dynamically to something like this. Pretty darn awesome, but he also comes with a couple other gimmicks. If you look down below, he has this thing called assist. By popping this set assist, he's able to then buff a certain person's attack here by a good 20%, but it's only for one whole turn. So we're going to go ahead and use it like this. It does a animation as well, where he puts his sword in front of him and of course boosts our damage accordingly. Now the skill 1, which is something you guys are going to use quite often, looks something like this, where it does a flaming little I guess you could say vortex underneath, dealing multiple hits of fire damage. Of course you have the animation change, which looks absolutely amazing, and then we have his third Gs. Now, one of his third Gs we could very well use as a DPS third G. The other one is a support third G. We'll get more into that afterward through showing the rest of his skills. But for the second skill, of course, it does something like this, where we're giving everyone a little bit of a buff, increasing our crit damage total. And then if we do have the right amount of moons, we can do the enhanced moon hit, which is going to look something like this, where he goes ahead, does his persona move, and summons a giant flaming spirit bomb down on the enemy. Pretty darn cool, to be honest, with this character, and one of the few characters I do love to use quite often. As I did say, he does have two different third G moves. If we go ahead and use one, the attack third G looking something like this, where he just tosses this huge ball and slices through the fireball itself, which is absolutely insane. Now the other one, we're gonna go ahead and actually reset this so we can show it, but it's more of just a buff. So give me 1 second to go ahead and restart this. All right, so showing off the support third G itself here, of course you click the second one here. It does a little bit of a buff on this man, which gives you some decent attack and damage bonus buffs here, allowing you to deal some nice damage. But still, I think the coolest thing in this entire kit is just this move, because I'm sorry, seeing a huge cruel sun drop on a person's forehead is freaking amazing. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. But now we went over this character, let's go ahead and go to the next category. All right, so the next DPS we're going to go ahead and talk about is the man Akechi. Now, Akechi himself is more of a sub DPS type character, and he is the only almighty character inside of the game. Though he is kind of the example of potential, he really could have a chance of being a good character, and it doesn't really matter if you have his 5-star or his 4-star. Both are really good, but to be honest, everything is going to be based on his what's it called, copying abilities or recorded damage that he does to the main character. If you guys play HSR, of course, the character named Cypher does this as well, but she does it in a way superior way compared to this character. Unfortunately for Akechi, his recording damage is not all too good, and for him to be significantly better, he does need to be fully duped out. But let's go ahead and show off some of his skills. All right, so talking about Akechi, the thing you guys all want to know is this character does need to be last, because the character that does the most damage, aka the detective partner that he just chooses, he will end up recording that said damage. So if we do only like 14k damage, that is what he is going to go ahead and record, and the detective partner is decided on this, where he's able to not only just boost himself but also boost the other person as well. But for his skill 1, it is a blessed oriented AoE damage move here that looks something like this, giving him a few little buffs from doing so. The skill 2 is your curse damage, which has these spikes that come up through the ground, dealing some decent damage as well. And the skill 3 we won't be able to see just yet, because we do need to record said damage from our ally. So let's just go ahead and let them do what they need to do here, and you guys will be able to see exactly what does happen. So if we use this, for example, in which I'm just going to go ahead and pop off this skill here, when it comes to Akechi's turn, he will then be able to record this said damage and deal some decent damage for himself. So the skill 3 is going to look something like this once, of course, we get it, but I think we do need to first do an attack, which there we go. We did our attack here, and then when it comes down to Akechi's next turn, he'll be able to perform his enhanced skill 3. So go ahead and actually just skip all this, let them get on past so you guys can actually see it, and then we'll also show off the highlight. So hopefully he doesn't kill anything. I highly doubt he will, because of course he's a sub DPS, so he's not going to deal the most damage. and it is only a percentage of what he has recorded for the damage markers. So let's go ahead and pop this on off here. And with his skill 3, he does an almighty move. So he shoots up these arrows in the sky. They go ahead and land on down, dealing whatever damage that he has, which was pretty decent at the time. Of the recorded damage that we ended up dealing, he did 65k for each one, which is pretty darn nice. But in the long run, out of these matches, he's not going to deal the most damage. But let's go ahead and I guess I'll pop off one of my stamina pots so we can just get straight back in here and show off the highlight and then move on to our next character. His highlight's pretty darn cool if you ask me. I think the whole way they ended up changing it from the beta is also looking pretty darn decent. So what he ends up doing after doing a little bit of a walk to the enemy is more of a little shots between the bless and the what's it called, the curse damage. So skip all of this stuff here and get to where he has enough highlight damage so we can really showcase this off, and then we'll move on to the next one. So let's see if we get this here. Go ahead and skip a little bit more because we do need a little bit more highlight damage here, and you guys can see it. It is an AoE type attack here. He does pull the trigger, shoots both a bless and a curse bullet, and then of course poses at the end with the explosion. Pretty darn nice, but doesn't deal the best of damage even when buffed. So just keep that in mind. But now let's move on to the next category. Last but certainly not least, we have Akihiko. This character came out someplace in between like 4.1.3 or 4.2, in which he makes himself very much so known as a very good electric DPS. He's the only other electric DPS that we have inside the game besides Yuki, of course, currently, and it's pretty darn awesome. He's also one of the few characters that has the most overpowered weapon in here because it builds both crit damage and crit rate. Looks a little funky for him. I would have rathered him having some boxing gloves, but it still was like pretty darn cool to see. Character has a bunch of flashy moves as well, which most of them are going to be AoE, with the single target being a actual what's it called, an highlight move. But he also has a interesting knockdown mechanic where he can little pop up this little circle and it does an automatic knockdown. But now we've talked about him a little bit, let's go ahead and show off his skills in fights. Much like the other P3 characters, Akihiko and Yukari both will swap their UI depending on if you're playing them to a little bit of a blue. And I want to showcase all the skills, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop off Anji's little skill here to allow us to go multiple turns to show off everything he can really offer. Now Akihiko, just like Makoto, Yuki, and all of them, will build their own 3G bar. They don't use highlights or anything of that nature. But the thing with his 3G is his 3G for the special it does do has a no matter what chance of critting, which is pretty darn interesting because you're usually not able to crit with 3Gs or highlights unless they're specifically given. He also has a W assist just like Yukari, which for his W assist, I'm pretty sure he ends up boosting up his crit damage if I remember correctly, and it's very, very nice to actually have on the character. The crit damage is around, I want to say like 20%, which is dang awesome to have, where he does this little animation here, punches at the screen, and it gives you this said crit damage buff, which is pretty darn interesting to say. Now for the first skill, it's going to look something like this, where he has both of these little shockwaves from the ground, or at least upwards from the ground, hitting you. And then the secondary skill has two shockwaves that goes towards the enemy, looking something like this here. Within the third skill, looking something like this, doing an ultra flashy punch or a flurry of punches here after he gets energized, and it does some cool freaking damage. It's pretty darn awesome to see this dang character, each of them dealing some more damage, and based on the amount of fighting spirit you end up having, which are these stacks that he ends up getting, the more damage he can end up popping off with. Now of course there is a little bit of something else that you can do with this character, which is the automatic knockdown I was talking about. Pretty darn interesting to see. I want to see if we can actually get it to proc here, but it's like an extra thing here, so I'm really not going to be too worried about it. Go ahead and show off the highlight here called Lightning Spear. Punches down the little lightning spear, of course, dealing some crazy damage. And the next time, of course, that we do this, you guys will be able to see the little knockdown as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and skip to that. All right, so to get the stacks that you do need to do the knockdown, you will have to have a certain amount of fighting spirits, which is that icon down at the bottom. As you can see, it says 6 now. And once we go to his turn, they'll allow us to do the preemptive knockdown strike that we're able to activate. And then you can follow up with the skill 3, dealing some extra damage, because as long as the enemy is knocked down, he will deal even more so damage. So when you have the amount of fighting spirits that you do need, this orb pops up, go ahead and click it, is an AoE no matter what knockdown, which is really nice for the one that you're looking at, giving you an easy hit. And then all you have to do afterwards is the skill 3, dealing some devastational looking damage, which is pretty darn awesome to actually see. But now that we have talked about every last DPS in the game, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. It took a little while to make this. I had to do a lot of cuts and clips here to try and do it, but hopefully y'all learned a little bit more about the characters with the brief explanations I tried to give, as well enjoyed the animations that you saw. So which DPSs are you going to invest into? Let me know down below in the comment section. And until next time, everybody, stay safe, stay sharp. Peace.